So, can I really write a story, create an artwork, and finish it in just 1 hour's time? Yes, and in the next 12 minutes, you'll see me do it from start to finish as I share my 4-part art process that helps me jump straight into the creative zone. Part 1. Finding my art story. Every picture tells a story, and behind every great piece of artwork is a story. It can be a literal story, an emotional story, or a color story, or something entirely of your own making. To begin, I create 6 separate envelopes, each labeled with a different category. In each envelope, I place a handful of word prompts that fit that category. My categories today are warm colors, cool colors, a person's name, real or fictitious, a place or location, an article of clothing, a tool, it can be a woodworking, gardening tool, kitchen tool, etc. Finally, I randomly select one word prompt from each envelope and use those words as the foundation for my story. After choosing my word prompts, I write. I time this part of the process at 6 minutes. I prefer to write by hand because it helps me feel more connected to my stories. However, you can also use dictation or even try a timed meditation session using your word prompts to help you visualize your art story. Do whatever works best for you. To practice the stream of consciousness writing technique, write continually without stopping to edit, letting your thoughts flow onto the page as they appear in your mind, even if they seem disorganized or fragmented. And not to worry, these are not fully developed stories. Instead, they are fragments of a story, brief scenes and visuals. Part 2. Make collage papers. Part of my art story is the color story. In this piece, I'll be working with a limited color palette, 2 randomly chosen colors, a warm mustard yellow and a cool violet. I'll use these colors to create my collage papers and in the painting process as well. So this is the formula I use to mix my violet color and my mustard yellow color. These are my formulas, but there are many ways to mix color. But if you'd like to use the color palette that I'm using here, I would suggest to use what you have available and mix some sort of yellow and some sort of purple into a shade that you like and go from there. I should mention that I use soft body acrylic paints to create my collage papers. I like Liquitex Basics because it's affordable, has good pigmentation, and a smooth, easy flow. But use whatever you have. If you have a heavier body paint, you can thin it with water or an acrylic medium. Working with a limited color palette speeds up the process because it reduces the amount of decision making. It also allows me to focus more on things like composition and texture. I also add white to the palette to help create lighter values and pastel tones. Here I'm mixing mustard and violet together to create my mother color, which I use to harmonize the entire palette. I also add a small amount of this mother color to white, just a touch, to create an off-white that blends naturally with the rest of the colors. Here I've mixed a little too much mother color into the white, but I will use the extra to make pastels. Here I have a mustard pastel and a violet pastel. Note, I am using a jelly plate to create my collage papers, but if you don't have one, you can also create collage papers using a roller, large brush, or a sponge. Today, I'm using 3 types of paper to create my collage papers. The first is standard printer paper, some recycled, which I use quite often. The second is tissue wrapping paper, and the third is pages from an old dictionary that was headed for the dump. Since it's a 1,500-page dictionary, I have plenty of material to work with for many months or years to come. I'll begin with a simple print by adding paint to my jelly plate and pulling a print with a piece of old dictionary paper. I won't show all the papers I make, just a few of the more special ones. Then at the end, I'll share the final results of all the papers with you. For this next collage piece, I use the crumpled up paper technique, a take on the Japanese mamigami technique. Later, I will add a second layer of paint, and the results of which I'll share with you in a bit. For this next piece, I'm using a texturing tool, actually a slightly painful looking scalp massager I salvaged from somewhere. Part of the fun is creating interesting textures with found materials like this. So here's the collection of my final pieces. I definitely made far too many, especially since my final collage will be on a 12 by 12 canvas. As you can see, after just 18 minutes, I've created enough pieces to cover a small room. In the next episode, I plan to manage my time differently, spending less time making collage papers and more time gluing and painting the final piece. Oh, and here's that piece of mamigami paper with its second layer of paint. And another piece that I made along the way. Here's a piece that I made with a cake decorating tool, kind of a checkerboard thing. Part 3. Cut, tear, and glue collage pieces. 18 minutes. For the backing, I use a heavyweight mixed media paper, taped on the back and gessoed on the front. I attach it to a hardboard surface so I have a sturdy base to work on. I also keep a fine mist spray bottle nearby and pour some Liquitex acrylic gel into a small container. This is the adhesive I use to glue the collage pieces to the paper. Next, I select the collage papers I want to use and begin planning the composition. Part 4. Paint. 18 minutes. Now for story time. You know my color story of violet and mustard. The name I chose for my word prompts is Eve. I visualized her as a young woman living in the Midwest, and it's winter, snow falling outside as she sits, lost in thought. Eve wears a violet-colored sweatshirt, my clothing word prompt, that her grandmother gave her during her last visit. Provence is printed on the pocket. My place word prompt is France. Eve's grandmother is French from the region of Provence, and although Eve has never been there, she has heard the stories of quaint villages and breezes that carry the scent of lavender and violets. She also recalls the French pastries that she and her grandmother made together during her last visit, using the old red-handled rolling pin still sitting in the kitchen drawer. During that visit, her grandmother had offered for Eve to come and visit or even live with her in France someday. For months, Eve had been going through a rough time, but now, wrapped in the warmth of her violet-colored sweatshirt, she begins to dream of going to Provence. And as she gazes out the window across the snowy vista, she decides she will. So, you can see, not all the prompts I chose from my prompt envelopes are visual ones. Some are emotional or spiritual. For example, I won't literally paint Eve's sweatshirt or the rolling pin, but the spirit of them is still there. Also the warmth and connection to her grandmother and Provence. So the word prompts can guide not just visual objects, but the feelings they evoke. So we're getting to the end of our 60 minutes. So I'm just adding a few extra little details. Kind of like this piece. I mean, it has a feeling for me with the story and all. So there we have it. To finish this artwork, I'll glue my collage onto a canvas panel, which I've painted around the edges with an antique gold finish. I like starting on paper first for collage. It gives me a firm surface and feels less intimidating than working directly on a canvas. If it doesn't work out, it's just paper, and I can file it away or tuck it into a scrapbook. So you can see I've added a few extra little details, such as painting a border at the edge of the paper with the mother color to give it depth. I mostly worked on the door because it dominated the painting and still does, but doors do represent a passing from one place to another, as the young woman, Eve, is doing in my story. I also wrote Provence on the painting within the painting, which I've now titled Dreams of Provence. So you can see here where I arrived at the 1 hour mark, and then my final, which took a bit longer since I added a few details and mounted it to the canvas, but the basic art was completed in 1 hour's time. So whether you use this technique to create a final piece in 1 hour or something to be used as a rough draft, I think this technique really helps to shake things up, shut down the busy brain, and get the creative juices flowing. I've also listed all the materials I've used in the description below, along with a few alternatives you can try if you don't have all the ingredients I've used. So stay tuned and subscribe to see next week's episode.